Good morning and welcome to the South Yukon Church of Christ online service. My name is Perry Green. I'm the preaching minister at the South Yukon congregation, and I want to welcome you this morning to this part of our service. Thank you for streaming with us. I know it's a special day in a lot of ways. Today's Easter. We in the Christian world celebrate Easter in a special way, remembering the resurrection of Jesus annually on this day. But in Churches of Christ, we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus every first day of the week. So every first day of the week, in a way, is like an Easter Sunday for us in that we remember his death, burial, and resurrection. But it's a special day in so many ways, and we are gathered together online, gathered together separately, so that we can share in this time together. I have to tell you all that I'm missing you as a congregation. I can't wait to get back and visit with you and see you in person, share scripture and sermons with you, some fellowship time together, and just see you face to face. It's been a long time since we've been together, it seems, and who knows how much longer it's going to be. But I'm really looking forward to the day that we get back together. Who would have thought a few weeks ago that we'd be sitting at home during church time watching a service online instead of being together as we normally are? But here we are. We're going to make the most of it. It's not something that we really wanted to do. We look forward to doing it this way, but this is how it's going to be, and we're worshiping together apart this morning. And when we get back together, it's going to be a special day. I heard one preacher say that when we get back together that first Sunday, it's going to be like Easter on steroids, that it's going to be such a special day. We're going to be so excited to be back together. I am sure that the singing will rock the church building, that we will have just a fabulous time together and encourage one another in so many ways as we get together. Now, I know that your plans are changed because of the virus going on, so you can't do Easter like you normally would, and maybe you're not wearing the Easter clothes you wanted to wear because you can't get out and go to church and have those special clothes. Maybe you're wearing your Easter pajamas this morning as you're watching us online. My daughter was real frustrated because she had bought some outfits for her three boys, some special Easter clothes, and she wanted to wear them, and obviously they can't do it on Easter, but can't go to church. But she decided to go ahead and take some pictures with those boys dressed up in their Easter clothes that she bought for them some time ago. And so I wanted to show you this slide and show you that she's trying to make the most of it. You can see the boys in their Easter outfits, and you do notice that they are barefoot. And this is a great indicator that we are Southern at heart. And so wherever we live, we are Southern, and we often are barefoot. And so she had a special time with her boys, and I hope that you do special things with your families today as we go through this Easter time and as we just make the most of it. It's the drive-by Easter egg hunts. It's the candy that was given out at the church building and the eggs and so on. I hope you're using the coloring sheets for your children as that's something that they can do, something important for them. I want to remind us to focus on the resurrection today, not only because we're dealing with life and death situations, but because in this resurrection we have hope in the midst of the pandemic. I hope that you're seeing how important church really is. I think sometimes we take it for granted and we sort of forget about what we're about. And sometimes we kind of take all this day in and day out and we forget the value of church. We are dealing with life and death issues as a congregation and as churches everywhere. People are literally dying in our world today. Just thousands have died. Of course, many people are getting well from the virus, but some are dying. And it's a serious thing. And where are they going to spend eternity? Well, it's a matter of life and death for us. And in the midst of the pandemic, we remember the resurrection and we remember the hope that we have in Jesus. I don't know why this pandemic is here. I don't know why the virus is in the world. I don't know if God sent it or God just allowed it or it's one of those things that just kind of happened in the world. It's a mystery to me. But I do know this, that in the midst of the mystery and the virus and all of that, God's going to prove himself to be victorious over the virus and all the other issues going on around us. And as a result of that, God is going to display his love for us all the way through what we're facing. There was a day, a Sunday, almost 2,000 years ago, that changed the world. It was a day that taught us some very special lessons, schooled us, if you will, on some great learning that we needed to have to help understand a little bit more about our God. One of the wonderful things about our God is that he continually shows us some things about himself. And that Sunday, almost 2,000 years ago, was a day that he taught us some great things. And I want us to go back there. We'll be looking at Matthew chapter 28, verses 1 through 10 in just a few minutes. But let's go back there and think about some of the lessons, the insights that we get about our God as a result of that particular first day of the week, that particular Sunday. And we can talk about it as a Sunday school or a Sunday schooling that we received as a result of what happened that particular day. Now, back in the end of the 18th century, there was a man named Robert Raikes who was a pioneer in Sunday school. Raikes was not the originator of Sunday school, but he was one of them that was a strong proponent of Sunday school. And the reason he was because back in those days, the children in many of the cities of England were used to work the factories and the different places where they could be employed. They didn't go to school. They worked in the factories 6 days a week, and on Sunday, they didn't do anything. They didn't go to schools, obviously. They just had the run of the streets. And as a result, they were getting into trouble, and as they grew up, they learned how to be criminals, and they would wind up in prison. Raikes and others decided that what they needed to do was to educate these children, and the only day of the week they could do that was on Sunday. So Raikes and others put together Sunday schools, and in those schools they learned reading, writing, arithmetic, and religion. And Raikes and others decided that if they could just teach them, and if they just had enough faith develop in them, they would be better people and they would have better lives as a result. So Raikes paid his teachers about 25 cents, and the children were even paid to go to the school, about a penny per child per day. And there they would learn all these different things. A lot of people got upset because there was a school opened on Sunday. They thought it was the Christian Sabbath and no one should be employed on the Sabbath. It should be a day of rest. Isn't that interesting? Those years ago, they looked at Sunday as a special rest day. We would worship and we would rest. The other days of the week, we would work. Remember the days of the blue laws in America, where many non-essential businesses, or all non-essential businesses, were closed. Only a few pharmacies, maybe some gas stations, just a few places would be open during those times because people viewed that as a day of rest, not a work day. And so only the essential places would be open, kind of like now. And we're kind of learning again that we don't need to be a 24/7 community or culture, that we can actually get along with some lesser things than we used to. But people have viewed Sunday as the Christian Sabbath. In fact, in America, we have 2 days a week off, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. One is to honor the Jewish Sabbath, and then others view the first day of the week as a Christian Sabbath, so we get both days off. Many other countries only get 1 day off per week. But back in 1850, when the Boston and Maine Railroad was running on Sunday, if you wanted to ride that rail, you had to convince the officials that you were headed to church. Otherwise, you couldn't ride. And when the New York elevated railway system began running, people protested in New York City because it was running on Sunday, and they thought everybody should be in church on Sunday. William Gladstone was a prime minister in England, in Great Britain. He made this statement. He said, "Tell me what the young men of England are doing on Sunday, and I will tell you what the future of England will be." Things really changed, didn't they? And now they've kind of changed back. We're forced to rest some. We're forced to take time off and take time to be with our families, take time just to isolate ourselves as it is. And now we're starting to focus on God a little bit more. So things changed, and things are kind of changing back. Well, I want us to go back to that first day of the week, that Sunday many, many years ago when Jesus was resurrected from the grave. I want us to go back and learn some lessons, be schooled by that Sunday, so that we can understand some things about who God is. Matthew chapter 28, starting at verse 1, we're going to read this text, and then we'll come back and make some comments on a few of the verses. But let's read the whole text together. Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He's not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he's risen from the dead. And behold, he's going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you." So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." There are a great many lessons in this particular passage, as you can understand, but I want us to see three insights this morning about who our God is, based on what he did in Jesus. The first insight is simply this: our God is mysterious. I mentioned a moment ago, I don't know where this virus came from. It's a mystery. Well, God is a mystery in so many ways to us. How can you explain God? He's above us in every sense of the word. He thinks higher, he works higher. Everything about our God is different than we are. You remember what he said through the prophet Isaiah, chapter 55, verses 8 and 9. "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." God is always above us. He thinks higher, his wisdom is greater, his actions are stronger. Everything about our God is beyond our comprehension. How do you have a God who is three in one? He's Father, he's Son, he's Holy Spirit, and yet at the same time he's one God. That's a great mystery. I don't understand it. I don't know anybody that does. One day we'll see it and we will understand it, but until that day, we walk by faith, believing that the Bible speaks truth to us. God gives kind of a progressive revelation about himself. He doesn't give it to us all at once, either about himself or about his will. Remember, Moses wanted to see God face to face. He wanted to see the glory of God firsthand, all to himself. And God said, "You can't do it. You would die if you saw me literally face to face." So what did God do? He put Moses in the cleft of the rock, covered him with his hand, as it were, went past Moses and allowed Moses to see his backside. That's about all Moses could handle. And as you and I think about who God is and how he reveals himself to us, he has done that a little bit at a time. He's not overwhelmed us with what he is and who he is, the plans that he's made and the things that he's done for his people. In Genesis chapter 3, God made a prediction about the coming of Jesus. And it would be that that the Messiah would have his heel bruised by the serpent, but he would crush the serpent's head. Adam and Eve sinned, and God did not immediately send his Son to redeem them. Over time, centuries later, Jesus would come into the world, and he would come just at the right time. He was revealed just when everything was perfect for him to do so. In 1 Corinthians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul makes an interesting observation. We've mentioned this several times over the past few sermons, but it just fascinates me to think about what God did and how mysterious he was in doing it. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. "But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory, None of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. Isn't that an interesting observation? If the evil rulers, both of this world and in the spiritual world, had understood what was going on when Jesus came into the world, they would not have crucified Jesus. When they did crucify him, they thought they'd killed him. They thought that the whole thing was over, that they had beaten God. But God had the last word. He raised Jesus from the dead. And by defeating death, he defeats all of his enemies. God is clear, and God is pure, and God is holy, and all those great attributes. And God is superior to everybody's thoughts and everybody's imaginations. And what he's done was a great mystery that has been revealed to us, at least in part. But there's more to come. Look at verse 9. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him. What's coming for you? As a believer, a follower of Jesus, as a faithful disciple of the Son of God, what's coming? Well, we can only imagine, like the song says. We can only imagine what's coming in the glories of heaven. Maybe you've read in the Revelation about what heaven's like, and you see those word descriptions, but you really can't comprehend it till you get there. And God is very clear about this place that He's going to bring us. The faithful of all ages will be gathered together with Him. But we don't really understand what it's like. We will one day, but right now it's a mystery to us. Well, the resurrection reveals some of the mystery of God for us. But the second insight is the fact that God is victorious. God is greater than anything, including death itself. In 1 Corinthians 15, verses 54 and 55, the Apostle Paul quotes from the book of Isaiah, chapter 25, the book of Hosea, chapter 13. Notice what he says. When the perishable puts on the imperishable, and the mortal puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The stone that was rolled away that day proved the victory of God. It proved that God was more powerful than anything you can imagine, including death. Look again at Matthew 28, verses 1 and 2. Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven, came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. And then it describes the angel. This angel came down and rolled the stone, not so Jesus could get out, but so that we could look in. There is this angelic presence that was overpowering to some people, fearful to some people. Look at verses 5 through 8. The angel said to the women, Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He's not here, for he is risen. As he said, Come see the place where he lay, then go quickly. Tell his disciples that he was risen from the dead, and behold, he's going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you. So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. The guards at the tomb fell to the ground as though they were dead. They fainted away when they saw this angel and the earthquake and the stone roll and so on. These disciples, these two women, came to the tomb and they saw same things that the guards did. But instead of being fearful, they had hope now, because when they saw the empty tomb, they realized that something was different, that God had raised Jesus, and this angelic message, this messenger of God came and gave this important message for those women to share with the disciples of Jesus. I wonder, as they looked into the tomb that day, what it was like for them. Nicodemus had brought spices for the body of Jesus. They wrapped him in grave clothes, put him in the tomb, probably laid those spices all over him because the spices would hide the odor that came with decay of the body. But there was no body. In that tomb, there were the grave clothes, as we know from other accounts. There was probably also in that tomb that day not the odor of decay, but the odor of those fragrant spices. And I wonder if those women, as they looked back, and then later as the disciples came and looked in that tomb, I wonder if when they thought back on that day, if they had in their mind the memory of those fragrant spices and the resurrected Jesus. Well, the encounters with Jesus also proved his victory. In fact, he is alive. The women met him on the way. Look at verses 9 and 10. Behold, Jesus met them and said, Greetings. They came up, took hold of his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. You see, Jesus comes to us in the times of our confusion. He makes several appearances after the resurrection, according to 1 Corinthians 15. But he's there, and when we're confused, no doubt the disciples were confused, didn't understand what was happening, expected him to be the Messiah and overthrow the Romans, and things didn't happen like they thought they should. And so Jesus came to them in times of confusion. He came to them in their fears to comfort them. He tells them, don't be afraid, but he gives them a mission, gives them something to do in harmony, in partnership with him. Go tell that I'm raised from the dead. You see, this is good news, isn't it? This is a good news that has come down through the ages for all people to know and to understand that Jesus, though he was crucified, is risen from the dead. He's alive, and today he has ascended to the Father and is at his right hand making intercession for us until he comes again. Jesus is alive. This is good news, and we have no business keeping this good news to ourselves. There was a concert violinist named Fritz Kreisler. He died in 1962, and he was a famous, wealthy violinist because he earned a lot of money through his concerts and his compositions. In some of his travels, he ran across a violin that he wanted to purchase. It was a spectacular violin to him. He wanted to be able to have it and to play it in his concerts, and it brought forth wonderful music. But he was also a philanthropist, and he gave away a lot of his money. So he did not have the money to pay the asking price for the violin. So he went home and he saved his money. And when he had saved up enough to buy the violin, he went back to the one who was selling. He'd already sold the violin to a collector. So Chrysler went to the collector and asked him to buy the violin or let him buy the violin from him. The man refused. I'm a collector. I keep these things. I want this violin as part of my collection. So Chrysler was discouraged and was about to leave, and then he had an idea. He asked permission to play the violin. Just one time. Let me play one song. So the man gave him permission. Chrysler tuned the violin, got his bow ready, and began to play. The owner of the violin was overwhelmed at the beauty of the music. And he said to Chrysler, you must take the violin. I have no right to keep it. It is yours. Take it to the world and let people hear it. Sometimes I think as Christians we forget that the good news isn't just for us. Sometimes I think we keep Jesus to ourselves, but there's good news that the world needs to hear, and we have no business keeping it to ourselves. Just like the women leaving the tomb, Jesus gives us a mission to go and tell that he is risen as well. This is a great lesson for us, gives us insight into who our God is. He's mysterious, he's victorious. And the third insight is he's amorous. That is, he's passionate, he's affectionate, he's loving towards us. The death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus prove to us that he loves us. Romans chapter 5, verse 8, Paul tells us that God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Jesus died for us. Even when we were the enemies of God, Jesus died for us. Even when we were without God, Jesus died for us. It is a great blessing of the love of God that he didn't just cast us off when we've rejected his teachings, but God loves us. How much does he love us? Well, he loves us enough to be jealous for us. God told the Hebrews that he was a jealous God and that he was jealous for them. And he didn't want them worshiping other gods. He didn't want them worshiping idols. He wanted them for himself. And that's the way he wants us to feel about him. He wants us to love him supremely because that's how he loves us. He's jealous, or the word could be zealous, for us. He's loving us enough to give hope beyond the grave. Paul would state again, the dead will be raised imperishable in 1 Corinthians 15. An imperishable life. One day we're going to be resurrected from the grave and we're going to live forever. A lot of times we fear many things, but in the midst of those fears, God can give us hope. And one of the greatest things we fear is death itself. But God says, yeah, you're going to die, but I'm going to raise you to an imperishable life, and I'm going to overcome death itself. So there's a sting taken out of death on our behalf. That's a real issue in our pandemic, isn't it? That people are literally dying. And we understand a resurrection's coming, but people need to know Jesus to enjoy the resurrection to life. And of course, God loved us so much that He gave us His only Son. John 3:16, and let's add verse 17. For God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten, His one and only Son, His unique Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. For God sent not His Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through Him might be saved. God sent His Son for the very purpose of saving the world. That's good news. And it took the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus to get that task done. Back when Leonardo da Vinci was 43 years old, the Duke of Milan asked him to paint a picture of the Last Supper. So da Vinci took meticulous time working on that piece of art. When he finally had it finished, he asked one of his friends to give him constructive criticism about the piece of art. His friend looked it over and he said it was fabulous. In the painting, Jesus holds a cup in his right hand, and the cup was greatly detailed. And the man said to da Vinci, "It is so special, so beautiful, I can't take my eyes off the cup." Well, da Vinci immediately stood up and with a brush stroked through the cup. And he said, "Nothing shall detract from the figure of Christ." The resurrection of Jesus focuses us on Jesus, and there should be nothing in our lives that detract from Him in our lives. In Acts 26, verse 8, Paul asks of Agrippa and others, "Why does it seem incredible to any of you that God can raise the dead?" That's an incredible thing, isn't it, in a lot of ways? But God's done it. Jesus is alive. He's the focus of everything. The world has changed because of Jesus. And every first day of the week, we are schooled in this great event. We get insight into the fact that God is mysterious, God is victorious, and God is amorous, passionate towards us. In just a few moments, we're going to eat the Lord's Supper. We're going to have our shepherd's prayer, and we're going to remember the things about Jesus together as we eat the bread, as we drink the fruit of the vine. It's a special day because Jesus didn't stay in the tomb. On that Sunday, He rose from the dead. On that first day of the week, Jesus was alive, and we celebrate that today. I hope you have a great day. I hope your Easter is special. I hope you do some traditional things with your families, and I hope you just have a really enjoyable day as we've worshiped together and as we've encouraged one another. So thank you again for visiting with us and streaming us online today. We'll be looking forward to seeing you next week, either online or in person. We don't know when that day is going to be, but we're looking forward to the next time. Thank you again, and bless you.